And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Two Back Set podcast, where we talk college football with a focus on the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Texas Longhorns. I'm the Iowa Hawkeye host, Thomas Ullman, aka Mr. Warburg. Joining me is Patrick, aka Mr. Fusion.
Welcome horns. That's all
Indeed,
I can say right now. I mean, we get a week off. We're coming
yeah,
back in. Hey, going into U of H, into that tiny stadium in Houston that's going to be 90% Longhorn fans. So, yeah, hey,
yeah.
this is where they make their march to the college football playoff.
Well, at first it's Big 12 championship
That's
because
true.
as of
Which I
right
think,
now, Oklahoma's in the driver's seat.
yeah, they are. They are.
So of course we are here on what was it? It's the 19th of October. Sorry, it's the end of the day, and it's been a long day. We're prepping for week 8 as well as doing a little recap of week 7 to start with. Speaking of Houston, that finish last week was absolutely insane with the tipped Hail
Yeah.
Mary and just that was one of the flukiest plays I've ever seen. And
That
I've seen
that
some weird ones.
that catch saved Dana Holgerson's job because he is
Well, for
that's
now,
the
it probably ain't
for
gonna for very
for a
long.
week. He got a 1 week reprieve. Let's just face it. They're going to lose against Texas, so they're not going to fire him after this game. Now, in the next week or so, but I don't think at this point they're just like screw it. Let him play. Let him coach out the season. But
Yeah.
yeah, that had they because when that game started, they were getting wiped. They were West Virginia was wiping the floor with them, and they came back. So I mean, yeah, that was just a hell of a finish of a game, man. Oh man, yeah.
It's one of the
Not
reasons you
as
watch college
not
football is
not as
finishes
good
like
as
that.
not as good as that final drive by Michael Penix in Washington to take the lead
Oh, it's
against
so
Oregon.
good. But I wanted to quick make a point. That's why you watch college football because those finishes, and like Stanford, Colorado, those finishes happen once a week in college football. They maybe happen once a season in the NFL, and then you get the once in a generation shit like what happened last year with Minnesota, where they came
Yeah,
back from how many was it, 34?
I think it was 34
It
points.
was
Yeah.
absolute insanity. And that's what you watch college football for is games like that. And Stanford, Colorado. I mean, what a second half! That was awesome. At least from Stanford's side.
Yeah,
So yeah, like you said, Penix. Is it Penix? Yeah, it's Penix.
Penix,
Big,
Michael Penix.
big. I can't believe Desmond Howard dropping Big
Oh,
Penix Energy. Come on, dude. You had to know that's not going to be good on a soundbite. You got to say the E correctly. It's
yeah.
like pen, not peen. Come on. All right.
But you know what? NFL fans are gonna love him
Oh
because
yeah,
there's
for
gonna be a
sure.
ton of Penix jokes that are
Oh,
gonna be
you
made.
absolutely know it. And he cements his status as the Heisman frontrunner.
Yep.
I do think the next guy closest on his heels is someone who's been discounted for now, but now that he's got his primary target back, Drake May is still sitting there.
I mean, you have to open up the talk conversation just because I think I said this before. I get why Caleb Williams was the favorite last year because there wasn't a lot of really top tier Heisman candidacies that like players out there to say okay they're worthy of it. It was just tailor made for him. This year's a very different year for not just like talent overall, but quarterbacks. There's a ton of quarterbacks that are in that conversation, right?
And a punter. Just
And a
saying.
punter.
Just
Yep. I
saying.
mean
That's a
he's
joke, but I'm just
Look, look,
saying.
look, 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 look. If anyone in Iowa deserves a $2 million a year NIL, it's the fucking
And he
punter.
can't
Let's be
even
real,
make money because of the
right?
international rules, which really sucks.
It should be able to go like into a
He he
trust or
he.
something for him,
That would
right?
be great, or he just gives it all to charity anyway. He
That would
does
be cool.
every kick counts, I think, which is a prenatal like checkup charity, like to make
Yeah.
sure the the heartbeat's being checked and stuff when the child's pretty early in the pregnancy. So
And you guys have a really great dynamic of the hospital right
oh yeah,
there.
it's awesome. The
And then
whole thing. A bunch of players give
everybody
their money
turn
to the hospital, which is pretty cool.
but I think it's cool that, both squads and their fans turn around and celebrate with,
Yeah,
at
it's
the
a great
windows with all the
tradition.
children that
Speaking of
that's
traditions
a great
with
thing. Yeah.
Heisman, I wanted to get back to the UNC discussion
Sure. Sure.
because now that Tez Walker's back,
Yep.
back half of the season, North Carolina's going to be in some more high profile games. Drake May's going to have a chance to make his mark for sure. But it still irks me that the Heisman is awarded before the postseason
Yeah.
because the stats count in the postseason, which is what's really the record books are going to be absolutely insane next year with extra games, right? So, are we going to continue counting these stats? Because if you do, that's 2 extra games. So, like rushing stats, passing yard stats, attempt stats, like it's all going to be ballooned.
Yep.
Do we just make a clean demarcation This is this era of college football for records. That's gonna be wild.
I think it's going to be they're going to. My thought is they're going to only count regular season record like
Because
stats
they
and then
used to.
postseason stats, and they're going to call it pre 12 team tournament era is what they'll call it. Or
Yeah,
you know
because I
they
want to say it
yeah
was right after Sanders left Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, Barry Sanders, right?
yep
Yeah, it was
yep
right after his careers when they kind of like went back to starting counting postseason games.
yeah because
You know,
before that it was only regular season stats.
yeah,
Yeah.
bowl games didn't count, and there was far fewer bowl games.
Yep.
So now there's a lot more, and we started counting them. So that's definitely a off-season conversation, but one I just was like, oh, that's gonna be crazy. But yeah, anybody else for the Heisman conversation jumping out at you beyond like who could catch Michael Penix right now?
Um, I mean, Caleb Williams is still going to be in the mix. What's his name over at Florida State? Is it
Oh God, I know his.
Jordan Travis or Travis Jordan? Travis Jordan.
That sounds
I'm
right.
like, am I getting you swapped out? I think he's still in the mix. I think Florida State. It's going to be an interesting ACC title game because
Jordan
if it
Travis.
be Jordan Travis, if it's North Carolina, Florida State, holy cow, that's going to be
Yeah, that's going to be
an entertaining game.
potentially the
Well,
premier conference championship game.
but you look at the ACC overall. I mean, you have Louisville, who I know they lost last week, but then the week before they upset Notre Dame, right? It was Notre Dame that
Yeah, they
they
got Jeff Brown.
yeah, Jeff Brom. That's right. So like that, Duke's actually 5-1. They look really solid. Clemson's on the rise. Their defense is really good. Miami's lost 2 games, but they're kind of like, hey, they're back in the top 25. Like the ACC is making some waves right now. But like I think the dust, like the whole madness, the back half of the schedule is taking place now. Same thing with the Pac-12. Like it's hard to say, man. Outside of Drake May at this point, I say Caleb Williams will still be in the
Yeah, because he
mix,
could
but
play back into it for sure.
yeah, he would have to really, and don't be shocked if Lincoln Riley puts him in a position to really pad his stats. But it's really at this point Michael Penix Jr.'s Heisman to lose. I really think that. I really think it's his to lose. Yeah.
Agreed. And that was your preseason pick.
Yep. Yep. I also told you don't sleep on Washington. Washington overall, man.
Yeah, great team.
I mean, even though they lost their 2 top running backs, they piecemeal the running game, but Penix is throwing the shit out of that ball. They have 3 really good big receivers, and their defense they're not a big defense, but they're very speedy, kind of like that old Texas defense that won the national championship, where they would get to the ball really fast, and that's hey man, it's it's led to success for Washington. Good for them. But yeah, Penix is I'm sticking with this guy all the way through. Shador Sanders was a bit surprising the first few weeks, but Colorado's come back down to earth. They just don't have the bodies, man.
But
They
not
just don't
having
have
an
the bodies.
offensive line will do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I hope it doesn't hurt his development because taking that many hits certainly can.
Now it's possible he may come back next year. There's talk about that because apparently he's going to make just under $3 million in NIL. It helps that your dad's getting a boatload. That you're appearing in a lot of commercials with your dad. It doesn't hurt him, right? But apparently he's getting like 3 million, almost 3 million in NIL. Why would he want to go when he can potentially play for a national championship next year? If the cards fall with transfers and a really good recruiting class, Colorado could be like we keep saying this, the darling of the of the new Big 12 next year. And I mean, why would you want to go? I'm sure Dion doesn't want him to go because he would have to go scramble and find a quarterback next year. But whatever, man. That's the business of college football, the recruiting side, right? But I still think he is a dark horse for the Heisman. But I think Drake May has leapfrogged quite a few people, including
Yes.
Caleb Williams at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, especially on that Tez Walker. Like, yeah, I'm that dude.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's why Mac
Oh
Brown
yeah.
was going to the
Yeah.
mat for me.
Right? Like UNC, you're like, hey, really good offense. Okay, you give him a legit #1 receiver, and look what you get out of Drake May.
Yeah.
You get top tier quarterbacking, which, like I told you beforehand, he is going to be a really good NFL quarterback. Drake
Yeah.
May has.
He's my
he
one. I'm like,
lives-
God, I hope the Vikings don't play their way out of drafting him. God, I
Oh
hope they
man,
don't. Especially now, hey, Cleveland might need a starter. Indianapolis needs a starter. Hey, somebody wants to call about Kirk Cousins. I ain't gonna be mad.
right? Get that contract off the books. Get at least a 3rd round pick for
Yeah,
him.
just
That's
start building some
lineman.
assets to package stuff. That'd be totally fine with me. But moving on to stuff that's not totally fine. Michigan back under NCAA investigation.
Oh
This broke
man.
this afternoon. The NCAA is investigating them sending scouts to future opponents' games to steal signals, which is against NCAA rules.
Yes.
Stealing signals itself, not against rules. You can do that in game, barring electronic interference, like you can't intercept radio calls and things like that. But if you figure out what they're calling, they don't care, and they shouldn't. But they do draw the line at sending like paid staffers or even just volunteer staffers and be like, hey, go report back to us about what the other team is doing. That is over the line as far as the NCAA is concerned. They have informed the conference, who has in turn put out a statement. Whoa, my light changed. What the heck?
Whoa.
Hang on, let me restart these. There we go. Back to normal. That was wild. And so the Big Ten has put out a statement as well as informed Michigan's future opponents that they have engaged, potentially at least, engaged in this activity.
Right.
Both that statement and the NCAA telling the conference tells me they think they got something. And they might not.
Right.
The NCAA has, of course, proven themselves to not be all that competent sometimes in investigations. But this one feels different.
And the fact that they called Michigan State to warn them ahead of their game, so that it gives them a preemptive measures to change their play calling and their signals. I think the NCAA thinks they have something on Harbaugh here. I do, and I know it's come out a few minutes ago that he's quote unquote shocked to hear about this, but I mean, come on, man. If it's a volunteer that's preemptively going out there, voluntarily going out there to opponents' practices and games and scouting on just like, I don't know the methods. I mean, it's like, I'm an Astros fan. Half of MLB was doing the digital sign stealing stuff, like all that stuff. I think that's where people were drawing the line is like, hey, how you're the means to which you're getting that information and passing along instantaneously was a problem in baseball. Well, this is the thing with the NCAA. They're saying like, look, you're doing it in game. That's that's their problem to figure out, right? But if you're going out there sending someone the week before to your upcoming opponent's game, whether they be visiting somewhere else or at home, and you're like basically spying, yeah, I can see how that's a problem. And sign stealing, I can go in a whole tirade about that. I'm not going to, man, just because I think it's
might be a little tinged because of the Astros situation.
Yeah. Like, I think you and I have had this conversation, and one day we could talk about like the whole unpacking of that saga, which revealed a lot more about baseball in general. But someone that's worked in the media, I will tell you this: sign stealing around sports, I'll be quite frank with you, happens all the fucking time. The stuff with the Patriots, the videotaping of the practices, and all that
NBC
stuff.
last week captured the Saints' entire play calling sheet,
right,
on video,
I mean,
high def.
I mean, and what do you think happens to that information?
Obviously they would, and obviously the coach is going to go in and change the the checks and stuff, but still, that stuff can happen inadvertently.
It's up to an organization, a team's responsibility to have not preemptive, but backup measures to change things on the fly, right? That's just a part of the sport, because every team in every sport wants to find a way to get an edge, and that's really it. I mean, that's always happened in every sport, but I understand the NCAA's rule about this is saying, okay, fine, but if you're paying people or having someone volunteer to travel somewhere, go on site, buy a ticket, bring a recording device or notes, something to take down the information, then we have a problem with it. I mean, because you're getting an edge on another team that may not be doing that. They may be focusing on their current week, and like there's a whole layer of things you can unpack with it, man. I don't want to go on a sign stealing tirade at all, but I will say this: I understand their rule, and like you said, for them to go and say, call the Michigan State to open this investigation immediately. Something like, I don't know if another team found out or if someone spoke up, but we're going to find out in the coming days what happened there. And that's strike 2 against Harbaugh in the same season, man. That's a bad look for John.
And it puts some different things in context that have happened in the past year in terms of what other people have said about Michigan. Now, like, I watch a lot of Iowa games, so like I hear people, like, Iowa knows what you're going to run, and from my take, from the context of just hearing how people talk about it, it's just because Phil Parker is that good. Like, he can diagnose plays. The team is so fundamentally sound. They don't do anything different for a different opponent, by and large. They might every here and there, but generally it's the same thing every week. They're just that fundamentally good. what I've seen in a few different interviews, like, The Athletic does those anonymous coach interviews and things like that.
Yep.
You had several people be like, yeah, they seem to know what we're doing a lot. And there was always
Right.
that, like, tone of, yeah, that's weird. Greg Schiano, earlier this year, Rutgers is down 7 at halftime. And the reporter asks him about penalties in the first half, and he completely sidesteps it and goes, yeah, there's some things happening on the field we need to figure out, and just stops talking.
Right.
Like, whoa, that. And the tone was different, too. Like, it just felt like they were pissed.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's getting pissed at, I mean, they're getting frustrated, but nobody's getting like, mad at Phil Parker for just having a good D, right, and being in the right position.
Right.
But it certainly feels like other coaches are mad at what Michigan has done, which tells me they think it's legit, too.
Right.
And that brings me to my next question, which is, does this impact this season's and like postseason? What do you think? Do you think the NCAA would have, like, if they can prove it and bring their evidence either publicly or, send down infraction, like punishments, do you think it affects this postseason?
I would think if the NCAA was going to be as aggressive as they were with the whole gambling stuff with Iowa and Iowa State, something would happen. But here's the reality of it: is they make a fuck ton of money off of Michigan being in the mix for the playoff.
NCAA doesn't. They don't control any of it.
I'm talking no, they get a portion. They get a
Yeah,
portion
but they don't.
of
They don't run the
the merch.
CFP and
Oh
all
no,
these
no,
other things.
I'm talking
Oh
about
yeah,
the
for
merch.
sure. Oh,
Merch.
don't get me wrong. Yeah, just
Yeah,
indirectly they make money.
the
But
brand from
it's not
the
like March
Michigan
Madness,
brand.
right?
Yeah, the from the brand, the NCAA makes money,
Yeah.
and Michigan is a premier legacy college football team, and for them to be in the mix makes a lot of sense. If you pull the rug completely under them right now and say like, oh, we found enough evidence to say they were doing it this season, the rest of the games are going to be played in protest. They're not going to count. They're not going to be. If you do all, they can't go play in the Big Ten title game. Like, I just think like I can see madness ensue because of that, right? And I'll be honest here. I've done this, and I did this enough covering sports to tell you this. If one team is doing something, multiple teams are doing something, right? And so if Michigan's doing this, it's safe to say there are other big programs out there doing the same damn thing.
Oh yeah, much like the gambling
Do
stuff.
do they want to risk Harbaugh speaking up about that? Because I'm sure he knows if there's I'm sure he has an idea of which programs are doing the same thing, And so, do you want that can of worms opened up right now as you're marching towards another big playoff with so much on the line? Georgia being three-peating, Michigan and Ohio State, Penn State, like in the mix, Oklahoma, Texas, like all this budding. And the Pac-12 is going to end, but you have Washington at the top of the heap right now. Like, do you want this football collision course to kind of have this albatross hanging on its neck, going into this Final Four playoff for the last time before we move to 12 teams? Like, do you really want that, or do you just we're going to investigate, let it go forward, contact the other teams on the schedule, whatever that's all been done. Our investigation, we'll let it ride until the season's over with. Then we'll do something. Then, if Michigan doesn't win the national championship, they can say, okay, well, we're going to pull the wins from them. We're going to pull the Big Ten title game from them. Like they could classify that nonsense, right? We talked about this with UNC and Tez Walker. Like, shouldn't he? Technically, he could go out there and play, and the NCAA just won't count those UNC wins, but the college football playoff will. They'll consider it, and they could technically have a record not recognized by the NCAA, but still win the national title. Like UNC could do that. Michigan could do the same thing, right?
Could they though? Couldn't the NCAA say no? You get no postseason games. Because right now, like say JMU runs the table and they finish number 4. Not going to happen, but this is a thought process. Because
Sure.
they're ineligible for postseason play, nothing the college football playoff committee could do. They're ineligible
Okay.
by NCAA rules, right?
So okay,
That's how
okay,
I would read it, but I don't
okay.
know.
Okay, so that brings up what we were talking about weeks ago, though. If Mac Brown said, "Screw it, let him play," we're doing it in protest. The NCAA could have said, "Okay, that's fine, but we're not letting you count these games. You're
See,
not
that's
going to be
different though, because that
postseason
wouldn't have
eligible."
stopped them from postseason eligibility,
Okay,
right? It would have stopped the wins, but it wouldn't have stopped voters for still voting for them and College
Okay.
Football Playoff Committee from still ranking them, right?
Now this is different.
But if
Okay.
it's postseason ban, that's different because that's a bowl game, like all these things.
But do you really think the NCAA would put those sanctions in place this fast, in a few weeks?
If they're this concerned about the integrity of the game,
Okay.
much like if they found out, like half of Michigan starters were also betting on games they played in,
Sure.
they'd be gone immediately, right? And that's an integrity of the game issue.
Okay.
If they're that serious about, that part of it, I could certainly see that happening and then saying, no, you don't get any postseason play. You can,
You were closer to the gambling scandal being in state than than I had access to information. I had to dig a little bit for it, but how, from what what was the window of the NCAA's involvement from
took them about 2 months.
discovery? So 2 months, okay.
Give or take. Yeah, because
So
they announced it end of June, beginning of June, with the Big Ten baseball
Okay.
tournament was just about to start. Iowa pulled a bunch of their players, and then they didn't announce punishments until August. But that
Okay.
was affecting, a not insignificant programs in Iowa and Iowa State, but not national title contenders, and certainly not, championship, postseason playoff like systems.
Sure.
This is different.
So for Michigan, it makes you wonder if Michigan State's been contacted this week by the NCAA to make them aware of what's going on. My question is, when did the NCAA find out, and where, let's just say they found out 2 weeks ago, where Minnesota and Indiana contacted. Like we don't know that, right? And I'm sure that information will come out, like when the NCAA was apprised of this situation. We probably won't get the full details of what were they given, what information they were given, but we can find out, like, hey, was this the first time, like, they contacted your team, or did they contact? Let's just say this happened a few weeks ago. Did they contact Indiana? Because if that does, that gives them a runway to really start working on the investigation. Like, this could have been going on for quite a while. Like, we don't know how long they've been doing this, right? We'll hear more about it as the investigation goes on from quote unquote insiders, but you're right. If the NCAA were to ban them from the postseason, that's it for them, right? Why the hell would Michigan even play the rest of their games, though?
Well, I mean, wouldn't be that much different than, like, I want to say, wasn't it in 18 when Ohio State was ineligible?
That's true. That's fair.
And they finished 11-1, had a great season, and that's really up to the coaches being able to motivate their players.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. It's definitely one of those like, whoa, that's really unprecedented situations.
But it is, like I said, this is the second strike on Harbaugh within the same season. Like, I have a feeling the NCAA, and of course people want to create drama out of it and say, oh, they're coming after him because he's talked shit about the SEC. Well, hold on, guys. Like, Michigan's not even in the same conference. What are we doing here? Like, if we don't like his methods, okay, is it related to this or just his coaching style? Because he's a polarizing guy, man. Like, he's not welcome in NFL circles because he's a bit of an asshole and people didn't like him. Players didn't like him in the NFL because he did have, like, very similar to Nick Saban. He was meant to be a college coach by his coaching philosophy. What worked for him in college doesn't work for him in the NFL. Nick Saban was the same way, right? I can see that being an issue, but apparently he really rubbed a lot of important NFL people, the wrong way, and they were very happy when he.
It also doesn't help. He's just weird. Like, as a person,
he's a weird guy.
He's a weird dude.
Yeah, he is a weird guy. Yeah,
not bad, but just weird.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a situation we'll be following up. I assume we'll have more updates by our Week 9 episode for next week. Yeah. So we'll stay tuned for that.
Look, they have Penn State in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, we will definitely know by then, I think, what the deal is.
Yeah.
So,
if not before the season finale, the regular season finale against Ohio State, we're gonna know something, like where the NCAA is leaning. We have to know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one last bit of things for us to talk about, and then we'll segue right into our Week 8 preview and picks. My team last week won a rivalry game to improve to 6-1. The Hawkeyes went on the road to the Wisconsin Badgers up in Madison and took the Heartland Trophy back with them. Won 2 years in a row for the first time, I want to say, since, like, was that 08, 09? Might have been, yeah, during the Bielema years. It's a long time. ran the ball really well, rather efficiently, actually. Didn't throw very well at all, only 37 yards. Torrey Taylor had 10 punts for a 50.6 average per punt, which is insane. Over 40% of his punts inside. I want to say six, is it 4 or 6 of the punts inside the 10-yard line, which is, that's the stat they should focus on, not the inside the 20. That's the dime a dozen stat. Give me inside the 10. I want to get those numbers because Torrey Taylor is that good. And it set off kind of a low-key firestorm among like kind of some of the national talking heads and college football podcast people, where the college football subreddit, being the college football subreddit, kind of took on its life of its own. It's like, did you guys realize Iowa could go 11-1 and make the playoff? Entirely mocking tone. Nobody was being serious. Everyone, including Hawkeye fans, know that's not even just remotely possible. It's impossible. It's just not going to happen. Like, and so we all just went along with the joke. Most Iowa fans, we're in the acceptance stage of the fact that this offense, it's not getting better. And it can't. We have too many injuries right now. Down a quarterback, 2 starting tight ends, running backs in and out of the lineup. Nobody can stay healthy on offense. So it's not going to get any better. So we're just going to enjoy the wins and then the inevitable, hand-wringing about the blowout loss in the Big Ten championship game if it happens. And that's going to be our season. And we're cool with it. And that apparently pisses the hell out of so many people that cover college football. I want to say it was the Cover 3 podcast, which generally I enjoy following. But I think it was Bud Elliott was on that show. He said, man, Iowa's this collapsing team. It's like, no, dude, they're 6-1. That's like the opposite of collapsing. I think it was Joshua Perry on Watch Stadium who said this is just not a serious football team. Like, okay, maybe not a serious third of a football team, but 2/3 of a very serious football team. So what the hell are we talking about here? I think it just pisses people off that Iowa's a good program that isn't even trying to be great. I think it just makes them mad. It is annoying and also amusing to me. But from the outside vision, as someone who's not an Iowa fan, what is your thoughts on that whole 6-1 Iowa maybe going 11-1 situation?
I find it funny given the changes that are going to take place in the Big Ten next year with having those flashy teams like UCLA and USC join, and Michigan, Ohio State. They are the offensive dynamos of the Big Ten, and Iowa's just puttering along in the West, right? They're like, hey, you don't mind us. I think I can see why people get frustrated because it's not the current model of college football. But if you were, which is funny to me because so many people are crying about the purity of the game of college football, all this stuff. Iowa's going in an unconventional model, but it's like, but you're talking about the purity. 15-6, those were old fucking college football scores. Like
not even that long ago either.
Defense and punting. Even in the Big Ten for a long time, that was like when the Big 12 was the offensive dynamo, the Pac-12, the ACC were much more focused on offense. The Big Ten was still a defensive conference for a long up until like the early 2000s, right? I mean, it cracks me up to think about this whole thing, and it's an unconventional approach to winning. When I say that out loud, what I mean by that is in the current space of college football, it's unconventional. What they're doing is they're winning with good defense, special teams, right? Okay. Like I made a joke about this in the first couple of weeks of the season. Bill Parcells is probably a huge fucking fan of Iowa football, right? I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, punting and special teams and defense, like that's how that guy lived. His stats weren't based off of NFL, like sacks, interceptions, and offensive points. He was focused on yards per punt, average position of the punt, average yards given up by the defense. That stuff was like Bill Parcells is like candy to him. That's what Iowa focuses on. Okay, I don't like it. Whatever, man. I just know it can be frustrating for you because you want the whole enchilada, man.
Not
You
even
want
the whole enchilada. I want the 99th best offense in the country. You give us that, Iowa's a college football playoff contender.
I'm not talking about that offensively. What I'm talking about is if you had a competent offense, you guys would be legitimately in the playoff talk.
Like, oh yeah, almost every year.
Yeah, if you had like just a middle of the road.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if you just had a competent coordinator, if we had Ken O'Keefe from 10 years ago, Iowa's in the maybe not driver's seat, but Iowa's possibly undefeated. Possibly.
Do you realize
Penn State was a blowout, but
Texas State out in San Marcos has one of the top 15 offenses in the country?
Yeah.
and near the bottom is Iowa. Like, I'm not saying you guys would have the top.
Yeah, I do
If you
think the
guys,
rankings are, don't get me wrong, like the yardage stats and everything is different, but
yeah,
I Kirk, I don't think is entirely wrong when he says, I think he said in the preseason, there was, those like coaches media days, like, hey, what's your favorite song and stuff. They asked coaches like, what's your most overrated stat? And everybody kind of clowned on him, but he's not wrong. Offensive yardage is overrated because you could put up 650 yards and lose by 14 points.
right,
Like the yards do not tell the story of a game. Like last week, 15-6. They do not tell the story of that game. Iowa went up 7-0 and it was over. Wisconsin had more first downs, more yards, like more of almost everything but points. And that's the stat that actually matters. Like,
right,
and also kind of that the eye test of like feeling the game as you watched it. Iowa was in control of that game. What, whether with the starting quarterback or the backup, Wisconsin couldn't move the ball because Braylon Allen couldn't stay on the field. He'd have one great run and then get bumped out of the game because he was dinged up. It just and Purdue the week before it was close at the end, but there was never any doubt Iowa won that game in the first quarter.
right,
So it's just an entirely different way, and a very old school way, I should say, of looking at football. And I do think it'll need to change. I don't think the AD is going to rehire Brian. I think most likely at this point he's going to be demoted to offensive line coach. Abdul Hodge, I think, is our current TE coach, who's a former linebacker. Great. One of the ones like, what if, man, why didn't he work in the NFL kind of guys? He was with Chad Greenway back in that 05, 06
right,
Iowa team. And he's a great tight ends coach. So maybe we don't need Brian to do that, but offensive line and they're like co-tight ends coach. And then you just go hire somebody. Go bring Drew Tate down from UNI. I don't care. Like just get a guy who can actually call plays because right now what we're doing does not work at all. It's very frustrating. But we're going to move on from the frustration to the future. We're going to talk week 8. We're going to start with Iowa because that's where we're at. It's
okay.
time for the Floyd of Rosedale. Which story, Fusion, do you know the story of the Floyd of Rosedale?
No,
So it
I
started
do not.
after Iowa and Minnesota got into it about having black players play. This was back in, I want to say it was the 1920s. I don't know if it was actually black players, but I know there was like some severe like fights, like people got hurt during games. And so like to keep the series alive and to kind of ease some tension, the governors publicly put up a bet of who would win the game. And I think Minnesota won the first one. They bet a live pig. That only lasted a year because think about the logistics of getting a live pig to and from Iowa City, especially in the 1920s. And so they eventually cast a 90-pound pig that they put on a trophy. And it's still the trophy they're using today. So the Floyd of Rosedale, I want to say Floyd was the pig's name. And then Rosedale Farms was in Fort Dodge, Iowa, is where the pig came from. And they have a whole thing on their farmstead outside of Fort Dodge right now, which is always a pretty cool story. And it's definitely one of the more unique trophies in college football because it's just a 90-pound fucking pig, dude. Like, people have
Right,
gotten hurt picking this thing up on the sidelines. It is heavy and awkward because, like, you can't grab the base. There's no handles on the side. You got to grab it basically by the pig. And that's not an easy shape to just pick up with 90 pounds from your chest up. Like, that's hard. I can't believe, oh God, it was a lineman. Was it Scherf? Might have been. He really messed up his wrist picking it up because he like handled it wrong and tried to save it. It was a weird story, but a very Iowa thing to have happen during a rivalry game. I think Minnesota still has as a 20-game lead in the all-time series stats. It might be only 10 now because they were a powerhouse back in the day. Like they were an
right,
actual blue blood up until like the 60s.
right,
But very recently, Iowa's won 10 straight. Minnesota hasn't won in Kinnick since 1999, Kirk's first season when they had a 1-win season. I don't think this one's going to be close, and this is one of our pick'em games. I actually say it's going to be close on paper, but it's going to be like, yeah, it's over at halftime. What's your pick for this one? I assume we're both picking
Um,
Iowa here.
I'm going with Iowa because the going into the season, I thought that Minnesota would have a better offense, and they haven't been very impressive
And
in
they're
terms
the
of like,
second worst Power 5 offense, only ahead of Iowa.
yeah. I
But
mean,
our defense is way better.
you look at three, they've lost three of their last four. And it hasn't been pretty. Yeah, I'm taking Iowa in this one. Now the spread is 3.5. I'm gonna say, and Vegas, man, they're such assholes with that three
Dude,
and a
it's
half.
it's 30.5 for the over/under. It's gonna break all the records.
Right.
And Iowa
So
set
yeah.
those records last year and then won both games with the under hitting.
So here's the thing though. This is a game that you really could go in and jump in on the prop bets. Like who's going to catch like how many reception who will catch the most balls? Will it be a running back? Will it be a tight end? Like I'm sure those stats will be out. Those prop bets will be out there.
Mhm.
I think it's Deacon Hill that's the quarterback now, right?
Yep.
Okay. I say he completed 6 passes 2 weeks ago. How many did he complete last week? Not very many, like 10 or
It was
12 or
6 last
something.
week.
Okay.
At
So
Wisconsin.
okay. And did
He
he throw
completed
six
more
the
in
week before?
Purdue, but he had a worse
Okay.
percentage.
Okay. I say he throws 8 completions this week, but Iowa will still win. They'll cover that 3.5. Yeah.
Fair
So
enough.
yeah, they're
Fair
not
enough.
going to blow them away, but they'll cover the 3.5.
Yeah.
It'll be a 5 point win. Something
Yeah, something
stupid.
something dumb like that. Maybe they'll have a safety. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
2 weeks in a row with a safety sounds very
Yeah.
Iowa.
That sounds very Iowa at this point. Yeah.
All right, so our other games this week, we'll go through the rundown here, and then we'll give our
Sure.
picks and our rationales. Starting the day, the big noon kickoff game, which is Penn State visiting Ohio State, going to the Shoe. That's 11 a.m. on Fox. So what's your, what's your bet on that one? Like you going, not bet because we don't talk betting, but what's your pick on Penn State, Ohio State? I think Penn State's a little
Um,
underrated nationally, even though they are number 7. I just don't see them going into the Shoe and getting a win. Not with that offense. It hasn't
here's
been
the
that
thing.
good.
Here's the thing. They both you just talked about yardage, but they both have technically middle of the road offenses. But I think Ohio State has the weapons on offense, right? I think they're a little bit better offensively, um, but this is going to be a really good defensive game here because I was very surprised going into the season. I wasn't expecting Ohio State to be this good defensively, and they're one of the top teams in the country, top 15 teams. So is Penn State in terms of defense. I think this is going to be a smash mouth game. My heart initially was like, hey, it feels like let's give it to the home team, 4.5 point favorites. I have a feeling on this one. My gut's telling me Penn State's going to upset. It's going to come down to the final possession, and Penn State's going to kick a field goal to win it. That's how I feel. So I'm picking the Nittany Lions in this one.
Fair enough. For me, I go with Ohio State because I think you said it's going to be mostly not defensive struggle. It'll be in the high 20s, maybe low 30s for both teams, but it's
Right.
going to come down to the big play. Like who's going to break the one or two big plays we see. And I think that's more likely to be Ohio State, significantly so.
Yeah.
So my money's on them scoring either a late touchdown or putting the dagger in on a big play because eventually Penn State's defense is going to break at some point and give that up. I just don't think you can contain Ohio State for the whole game like that. I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, Notre Dame showed you can, but that was early season. McCord was still getting his feet under him as the QB, and it was a road game. This is a home game, different situation, conference, driver's seats in play here. So I think Ohio State's probably the pick for me.
Okay, that's fair. I really think. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is obviously arguably the best wide receiver in the country, and it's hard to argue against Ohio State. But this was one of those where I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, something just tells me that Penn State's going to catch them a little off guard in the fourth quarter, and they're going to win it, man. I feel like this just when I read it, it feels like we need one of those top 10 teams, like top 10 matchups where there's like a shocker there, and I think it's would technically be a shocker because the spread's not huge, but I think people aren't giving. From what I've listened to this week, people aren't really giving Penn State enough of a chance to win this game.
Fair enough.
All right.
All right, so our other 2:30 game, the Iowa Minnesota game we already picked, is at 2:30 on NBC, 2:30 on
Yep.
CBS, SEC on CBS. You've got number 17 Tennessee visiting number 11 Alabama. Fusion, what's your take on that one?
Alabama came back down to earth for a little bit this last week against Arkansas, but I think Alabama just has an incredible defense. I think Tennessee is playing a little over their heads right now. I'm picking the Tide to win this game. It's at home, man. It's in Tuscaloosa. I'm gonna pick Alabama on this one. Yeah.
Don't fault you at all. That's what I'm picking as well. I think the line I saw last was an Alabama 9 at home, which makes sense. Tennessee's a good team, but
Yeah.
Alabama's like a good team that could play into being great by season's end if
Yep.
they start cleaning up some issues. And they've got Nick Saban, so I'm gonna go with them. Uh,
I I think people were giving Tennessee a little too much praise last week against the A&M. A&M is in disarray right now.
they
They're a
have been
mess.
for a while.
Yeah, they are an absolute mess, and
There's a
A&M has
reason they
enough.
have not been on this board.
Yep, A&M has enough talent to be competitive and catch someone off guard, but they're in total disarray from top to bottom right now. And I think people were after that win, people were giving Tennessee a little too much hype, and they're going to go in and they're going to be brought back down to earth a bit by the Tide this weekend. Yeah,
All right. So our next one, and this one I assume is another unanimous pick. 3 o'clock kickoff on Fox. We've got number 8 Texas visiting Houston. I imagine we're both going Texas pretty handily.
obviously this is in Houston, 2.5 hours away from Austin. From what I've seen from the data, it looks like this is going to be a very Longhorn heavy crowd in that tiny stadium, TDEC, I think. They hold like 35,000 people. Um, yeah, man, they've got something to prove here. They've had a week of off to rest after that Oklahoma game. Like we've talked about it last week. This is an opportunity for Texas and Oklahoma. they, Oklahoma is obviously above them in terms of control for the playoff. But hey, if Texas wins out the rest of the way and they face Oklahoma again in the Big 12 title game, they could easily be in talks again for you know for a playoff spot, and especially if Alabama keeps rolling. I think that's going to help them tremendously. But yeah, man, this is going to get a little ugly here. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
I don't
lie.
think that one's going to be very
We
fun to
talked about
watch after the halftime.
we talked about the U of H Hail Mary last week against West Virginia and that comeback win.
Yeah, the magic's gone. It
It's
happening
yeah,
this week.
it ain't happening against Texas, guys. I'm sorry, you're not gonna catch them off guard. This Texas team has something to prove, and I think they're gonna come out and what's the spread on this game? Oh shit, spread is 23 and a half points on the road.
Yeah.
Texas covers that easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our last game before we get out of here, Infusion can go watch his Astros tie it up against the Rangers. We've got Clemson visiting Miami. It's a 7 o'clock kick on the ACC network. I'm going Clemson. I think they're starting to figure things out, much like Alabama is as the season goes along. They've got the better in-game coach in Dabo Sweeney because of Cristobal's, just the clusterfuck with the kneel. And last week getting, I want to say it was bludgeoned, but like, maybe that's the right word against UNC in terms of what their defense got bludgeoned.
Yep.
And I just don't see how they hold up to Clemson, even at home. My money's on Clemson.
Okay, man. I hate to break it to you, but Penn State Ohio State's going to have to be your deciding game here for it to gain some ground this week, man. Because I'm picking Clemson as well. I don't know, man. I know Miami's back on the rebound, but I think they're posers, man. I think they're pretenders, not posers. Pretenders is a better word. I think they're pretenders, man. I don't think they're there yet. And Cristobal is just yeah. 2 weeks ago, that shit show of an ending of a game. It just yeah. There's just when I
You got
unpack
to
some of the
wonder
things
how the
about the
players are feeling. Like after
yeah,
that loss, and then they getting like Tennessee or not Tennessee, UNC just coming in and be like, "Yo, we're going to give you the upside down you at
and
home and just roll you."
Clemson's defense is big. They're fast, and I think I think the team as a whole are hungry to get back into the top 25, and this is where they get back in. They're going to go in. They're going to go into Miami, and they're going to stomp them. Clemson's a 3-point favorite on the road over at Hard Rock Stadium. I say they bust the door. They blow the doors off of Miami this week. I think they easily attended. I think easily a 2-score win. Let's put it like that on the road. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I
Yeah.
agree there. So our standings, speaking of making up ground, Fusion is currently in the lead with 24 picks correct so far. We don't do
Yeah.
spreads or anything like that. We're doing just straight win-loss.
Yeah.
I'm at 22. Eddie is also at 22. Gamma, Chris, our friend Chris, he's at 20. Our friend Shadow, he's at 20 as well. And then Ty, who only picked the last few weeks, is already up to 14. She had a 4-1 week last week.
She could
So
easily
like if she
catch
has a
up
couple
pretty
4
quick.
more weeks and we split games, she could catch up by season's end. It's possible.
Well, obviously, if she ends up in the top 3 in the standings, she's going to get the wood burning, man. I
Yeah,
mean,
if she can catch Eddie,
Yeah.
It's possible because we didn't have a good week last week. I mean, I was right. No, wait, I was wrong. I picked Wisconsin. No,
Okay,
I picked
so
against Iowa. I'm not
you
this
picked
week.
against. I did too. Here's the thing: is that I screwed up last week, man, and I'm embarrassed by this. I had told everybody I picked Mizzou over Kentucky,
Yeah, I
and
got
I
you. I
meant
got
to
it in
do
my
that.
note sheet.
And I meant to do that. But during the game, I logged in and I'm like, oh shit, something happened. I screwed up and accidentally picked Kentucky on the pick 'em. So, you know, I could have had a much better week, but still, whatever, man. I'm taking the loss. That's on me. I'm taking ownership for this shit. That's my fault.
You got to take the
I fucked up.
responsibility like a proper head
Yep.
coach would.
Right. You know what? This is on me. This is on me. This loss is on me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm gonna figure things out, and I'm gonna do better. So I'm gonna be a better coach. I'm gonna do better. So yeah.
We'll have to do
But this,
better in week 9 because we're getting out of here. Fusion's got to go watch an Astros game. We'll be back to recap week 8, talk week 9 picks next week, probably sometimes Wednesday or Thursday. So hit the subscribe, leave a review if you would like to, like the YouTube video, help that algorithm out as much as you can, and we'll see you next week.